How's it going, people? Um, just so everybody's aware of it, this is going to be one of those big boy pants videos. I'm going to say some things that you may see as being against something that you automatically believe in, and I may suggest some things that you might disagree with. Um, Make no mistake, I am very much for the Bill of Rights and for civil liberties and all that entails, and for the original intent of those policies. So if you ever find yourself getting confused while you're watching this video, try to remember that. And if you get too confused, you can leave. Be gone. And don't mind this. I hit my head yesterday. I feel better though. So my good friend on here made a video about being torn over whether or not to defend the Second Amendment among people who you thought were for it, or who are unaware of guns and stuff like that. Like, is it worth it to talk to people about these things? I think it is. I know this is responding to you. Um, I know how you must feel because there are a lot of people that own guns that you talk to and you think, yeah, this guy's on the level or this gal's on the level. Then you get on the subject of certain type of equipment. Maybe in my instance, it was the 50 caliber Barrett, and the person I was talking to is like, people shouldn't be allowed to have those. And immediately hearing that statement, you like feel the adrenaline rush. Like, what did you just say? What do you mean people should be allowed to have those? And then you get into this discussion about civilian ownership of some things, and how something should be a controlled device because of its nature and destructive ability. I think to a point we are paying for the disingenuine pundits of the 70s and 80s who mistakenly thought that by saying, well, the Second Amendment is about hunting and sportsmanship in order to kind of keep Big Brother from beating them with a stick harder. We're still dealing with that disingenuous approach. So that's not a good point to make your stand on. I think it's good to talk about gun ownership because it allows you the ability to bring up the topic of force and violence and force monopoly, and what the nation was founded on, that is freedom and liberty, um, which by any stretch of the imagination and in anybody's definition, I see freedom and liberty as being able to do what you want to do. Itch. Okay? And uh, James Madison believed in it, Thomas Jefferson believed in it, and many others believed in it, that a person had the right to a well-regulated militia because it was necessary for a free state, and that due to that, the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. On George Washington's farewell speech, he talked about the differences between government and the citizenry, and how the government should never be some sort of a party or monopoly over the citizenry. He stated in his farewell speech, and I paraphrase, that that's what they were trying to avoid. They wanted the government to be raised up from the citizenry, not to establish somehow a hierarchy of elites. And he warned that it could happen. So over time, this hierarchy gets established, and you have generation after generation after generation of political government leaders who have access to people who have been bonded, who have a monopoly on force and violence. And some bizarre switch happens in a person's mind. Like, how many times are they eating at a restaurant around law enforcement officers? And let's say those law enforcement officers are equipped with a 40 caliber, and they're carrying what, just on themselves they got 30, 45, at least 45 rounds of ammunition just on them. It's not counting what they may have in the radio car, and that's each. And they're perfectly comfortable with that because they're comfortable in the thought that they somehow control that force and violence. So let's be honest about firearms for a moment. And I've been very lucky to have the friends that I have that take such a look at such things. A lot of people want to downplay what a firearm is, and it's like the Pearl Jam song with the glorified version of a pellet gun. And a lot of people treat their firearms in such a fashion. But what a firearm can do, and what it is very much capable of, it is a multiplier of force, a multiplier of violence, and it is a device that allows you to exert your violent will upon objects very far away. And the more ammunition that one of those firearms holds, the more the potential violence you can exert. So the question comes down to, when you're talking about what a normal citizen can and cannot own, the question comes down to, do you trust your fellow countrymen with the ownership of such devices? And the question is also, why don't you trust your fellow countrymen with those devices? Why don't you trust yourself with those devices? Do you somehow believe that you're in control of the people who do have those devices, yet no one else can have them? That way, something that isn't in your control doesn't have the ability to match your force? Or you're the only person allowed to have those forces? Because when you're the only person allowed to have those forces, then you get your way. Because the final arbiter in any dispute, the absolute final arbiter in any dispute, is the force and violence. So if only one side of the dispute has the capability of multiplied force and violence, they get to win. And I really think that's what this is about. It's about who will get to have their way at the end of the day. And shamefully, what ends up happening, the people who either willingly or unwillingly want to ensure and encourage a force monopoly use examples, honestly, intermittent, violent, criminal examples in order to further their cause of a force monopoly. If a person like Roseanne Barr, for example, with her armed bodyguards, if it's less likely for people around her to be armed, well, she gets to be the one who's armed, and she gets to feel a little bit safer. Using examples of sporadic, insane criminal violence to incite fear in people, to some sort of a call to action, is the most terrible way to conduct policy. Because what's really the point? What are you trying to fight against? You're trying to ease people's fears, right? You can't ease people's fears, because a fear is subjective, and a fear is irrational. You want to be objective about it, and we want to combat the loss of life? Well, then why don't we get as passionate for the things that causes a loss of life? Certain styles of traffic control devices, the Stairmaster, What kills more people in a year? A beta magazine that some asshole put on his AK-47, or a Stairmaster, or weightlifting equipment, and killing and maiming people. But I think it can be worth it, because every once in a while you find a person that's really, really keyed into freedom. But you gotta, in the discussion, you gotta keep track of where you're going with your point. You can't just get involved in the details, because everything has a beginning, a means, and an end. And for so many, it seems like their end isn't exactly clear. So without really knowing where we're going to end up, we nitpick the details of the means, and that's a weird way to debate. Yeah. So I hope this video helps out, and brings a couple things to light. And I'm glad I was able to share a couple things with you about myself and how I view things. And so no, I do not think the Second Amendment is obsolete in any way, shape, or form. And just to be 100% clear, when something like an individual's access to a well-regulated militia, just when it seems most likely that, or how do I want to put this? In a time when people say, no, you don't need such a thing anymore to secure your freedom, that's exactly when you're going to need it, man. And it isn't because of China invading or anything else. It is against any principality that dare oppose your freedom and liberty.